when I was a kid, I was a big fan of baseball. Well, I still am a big fan of baseball. I'd love to go to games, and it was always kind of a ritual to get the scorecard and fill in that scorecard and keep track of everything during the game. And then, of course, you'd study it on the way home and talk about the game. So when I was looking for topics, one of the Ballotpedia All-Stars, Audrey Faber, came up with a new topic that we talk about today, which is scorecards. In this case, we're not going to talk about baseball scorecards, although I'd love to do that. We're going to talk about political scorecards. Many of you probably don't know what that term means, and quite frankly, I wasn't sure myself, but Audrey's going to explain it in great detail. And when we come away from learning about political scorecards, what I'm hoping all of you viewers are going to do is perhaps in your state reach out, find out who's keeping score in your state, and as we get closer to elections, study some of these scorecards so you can learn about the election either to come or how your legislature is done in the last session, etc. So Audrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Did you ever do a baseball scorecard?
Absolutely. I grew up playing baseball all the way through high school, and we studied those scorecards, I think, probably just the way you did.
Perfect. Now you're doing political scorecards.
Yeah, they're actually rather similar, to be honest. The main point of them is very similar, and it's to rank and review how a voter or how a lawmaker votes on a particular issue or set of issues. So in many ways, they're used by advocacy groups, various nonprofits, voters, anybody who has a stake in the political arena uses these scorecards to track who are the best lawmakers and who are the worst, similar to the way that we used scorecards in baseball to figure out who are the better players than the others.
So what caused Ballotpedia to decide that this was an important topic that they wanted to cover?
Well, scorecards in general have become such a staple in American politics. And since Ballotpedia is an encyclopedia of American politics, we thought it was important to make sure that we were covering this aspect of American politics as well. One of the things that I thought was very interesting is one issue advocate wrote when he was talking about scorecards that the most powerful words he could say to an elected official was, "My organization is scoring this vote." So these scorecards are important to all of the various stakeholders in politics. But we also noticed that Republican lawmakers tended to do better on these scorecards than Democratic lawmakers. And we were curious what was driving that. Was it because the Republican lawmakers were doing better in state legislatures for some reason? Or was it because there was some sort of correlation to who was producing the scorecards? And that's what really pushed Ballotpedia to look not so much at what the scorecards said, but more of who is producing the scorecards. And this tracks with what we aim to do in general at Ballotpedia, which is to give voters and readers all of the information possible for them to make educated decisions. And I think it's very important for readers and voters, if they're going to use these scorecards to decide whether or not a lawmaker tracks with their political ideology, they need to know where these scorecards are coming from. And that's really what we looked at.
Now, I guess from reading the site on Ballotpedia, what is true is that at the national level there's lots of scorecards, but you are getting more focused now on state level scorecards, correct?
Correct. So these scorecards that we looked at were all about state legislatures around the country. And we looked at 189 scorecards for the most recent legislative session that scorecards were available. In most states, that was 2013, since the scorecards for 2014 are just now coming out. But in states like Texas that have their legislative sessions only alternating years, it would be 2012. So it was around in that period when these scorecards are scoring. And there were 189 of them for that period, but we have hundreds and hundreds more for periods prior to that readers can also take a look at.
Now you mentioned that it strikes fear in the heart of a legislator when they know they're being scored on a vote.
Yes.
But I know, and oftentimes the organizations that are producing these scorecards have during the election cycle, asked the officials to fill out questionnaires of how they might vote on a hypothetical question. Do these scorecards include rankings of the questionnaires versus the votes, or just the votes themselves?
Sometimes they do. Scorecards can come in a number of different forms. The one that you're referring to are pretty much usually referred to as voter guides. And those usually include information about how a lawmaker would vote in general. Because not every session is going to have a vote or multiple votes on an issue that would be relevant to an advocacy organization. So they do include those, though typically I would say the bulk of scorecards are strictly about how the lawmaker has already voted.
And then obviously a scorecard would tell voters whether or not this is someone they want to support, but I'm guessing they're also used for fundraising as well.
Oh, absolutely. Most scorecards come down relatively partisan, which means that organizations that tend to lean conservatively or lean liberally rank conservatives higher for conservative leaning organizations, and rank Democrats or liberal members of the legislatures higher when it's a liberal leaning organization. So they are used for fundraising because in most cases a conservative lawmaker is going to do pretty well with scorecards from a conservative leaning organization and vice versa.
And then in most cases, are they actually giving a score? Are they giving a grade? Are they giving you got 6 out of 10? What is the result that they're producing?
They come in all different forms. Sometimes it's percentages. What they'll do oftentimes is they will list the bills that were relevant to that particular organization. So for example, the League of Conservation Voters will pull all of the bills from that legislature that are relevant to conservation issues, and then say, this person voted yes when we said they should vote yes, or no when we thought they should vote no, or vice versa. And then usually they'll say 80% of the time, this lawmaker votes in line with our principles. Or they will say this lawmaker gets an A on conservation issues, or a B or an F, whatever would be the most appropriate grade. So the grades come in a number of different forms, but usually it's pretty clear how an organization feels about a lawmaker.
And let's pick a state that has 100 legislators. Would the scorecards traditionally rate all 100, or would they just rank the top 10 best and the bottom 10 worst? How do they do that?
They actually usually do every single lawmaker. And the reason is because they look at only particular votes. They'll look at certain bills that are relevant to their organization and how the lawmakers voted. And that information is all publicly available. You don't have to have any sort of special access to get that information. So a reader or a viewer of your show could go and look up the exact same information, and then they will score every single one. But states that are larger population-wise, such as Texas, do have a number of scorecards. But we found that larger states don't always actually mean more scorecards about them. So there isn't any correlation to the size of the legislature and the number of scorecards written about them.
And I would think that may have to do again with the state. You mentioned conservation, and you said you're from Oregon. People in Oregon may be a lot more conscious about conservation. So, and you may have 6 or 10 legislative initiatives, and you want to score on those 6 or 10. Other states where they may not be as active on conservation, they may not even vote on a conservation measure. So maybe that's got something to do with it too.
Absolutely. And what we found is that most scorecard producers for the state level really only produce one scorecard per state. So these are state-focused organizations. And typically that means the organizations that are issuing scorecards in Oregon, who was one of the top 5 receivers of scorecards, aren't usually issuing scorecards in, say, Nebraska. But we did also find 15 organizations that were national organizations where their state level entities often issued scorecards. And the League of Conservation Voters is one of those groups that issued scorecards in 19 different states.
And I guess people that are issuing scorecards, I don't know if they have standards, but I'm guessing, again, if there's a state where there's only one vote on an issue, it's kind of hard to have a scorecard. You must need maybe 3, 4, 5 different issues at least, but maybe not. I don't know.
For most part, yeah, you do see those multiple votes. I haven't seen any scorecards with just a single vote, but scorecard issues are usually broad enough that there's a number of things that could be pulled into it. So, for example, business issues. There's a lot of votes that could fall under business issues. And in states like you mentioned, Oregon, there are a lot that would fall under conservation or environmental issues. So typically, the issue focus is broad enough that most states vote enough on those issues. But again, somewhere in Texas is less likely to be having a lot of votes on environmental issues than, say, a state like Oregon or Washington.
And I know you've found these measures and you're now putting them on the Ballotpedia site. Are they generally publicly available information, or would you have to go to the industry themselves or be signed up for that industry, so to speak, in order to get access to this information?
A lot of it is available on these organizations' websites. You just have to really hunt for it. A lot of it is available only for a short period of time. A lot of them also do get mailed or emailed directly to us. So I would say probably 3/4 of scorecards that we keep on our website were at least at one time available to voters. But a lot of time the organizations will post their most recent scorecard and not necessarily give access to the older ones. And we keep access and PDFs of all of the scorecards that we have ever found. So on our site, you have scorecards back from 2009, 2008 that may not be available to a lot of, or may not be available on those organizations' websites anymore.
And legislators get accused of flipping, whatever on issues. I guess if someone went to your site and you looked up a 5 or 6 year history on someone on a scorecard, that would not only tell you how they did in 1 year, but if they were consistent over a range of time.
Absolutely. And that's one of the real values of these scorecards, and one of the reasons that Ballotpedia has made such an effort to collect and make these available is that if you view the scorecards collectively for multiple organizations across multiple years, it gives readers and voters an opportunity to get a really good picture of how somebody did in office, which may very well be different than what their advertising materials and marketing materials say.
So Audrey, tell my viewers how they can find this great information on the ballotpedia.org site.
Well, if they go to our website, ballotpedia.org, one of the options up near the top of the screen is state. And if you click on state, it will take you to our portal for all things state politics. And you will see a picture on the little slideshow of the scorecards. You can click on that, and it'll take you to the write-up that we did. On the write-up, we do have a feature where you can click on your state, and it will show you all of the scorecards that have been produced about that state. And they'll be organized by year, so you can click through and you can read the older ones or the newer ones or all of them. And if your readers look through those and they find any, or they notice any that we're missing, we would love for those to be sent to us, or just a quick note telling us about it, and they can send that to scorecards@ballotpedia.org.
Audrey, thank you so much for your help today. This was your maiden voyage on the show, but you now have joined a long list of Ballotpedia All-Stars, so congratulations.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I hope that I can come back again and talk to you about something else.
Absolutely. We'll see you soon.
Great. Have a wonderful day.
You too.